Hey, good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning to you.
And Bart, how are you doing? Our subject matter expert today.
Very good, very good.
Good, good. We'll get to you in just a second, Bart. Hey, so Professor, I'm kind of surprised myself that out of all the multitude of things going on in the world, I mean, this was really a pretty big week. I listed a couple. I don't know if you saw them, but the California wildfires is a really big news story. And are there some public policy issues involved with that? Yes. The SpaceX failure yesterday, that's a big deal. The special prosecutor's release on the president's involvement in the overthrow of the stopping of the election. I'm not sure what the official report was called. That was released this week. Potential peace in Israel and Hamas in the Gaza area. The Senate confirmation of President Trump's picks. And then TikTok, the U.S. Supreme Court just ruled today that no, that law is valid. It's going to shut down on Saturday, or is it? Yeah, that's going to be the nice transition to Bart to talk about some stuff. But why do you think I didn't want to talk about all that stuff, Professor? Am I wrong? I mean, should we have been going through like the history of the history of fire with Professor
Fire,
Tootle? You know,
fire bad. No,
yeah,
I don't know. It also reminds me of how often how much we're paying to the news cycle depends on what's going on in your life. I had this was the first week of school,
yeah.
and my kids were both very busy, uh, and so, if you want to know what I was doing, I was busy almost every single minute of every single day this past week, and I haven't had any time to pay any attention to the news really. So, I see those headlines, but I haven't thought about any of them, and I haven't done any, research onto any of them.
Well, so you were like, what, 70, 80, 90, 95% of Americans that
Probably,
rarely think on
yeah,
politics? You
yeah.
know,
I was doing stuff like driving my kids to practices.
that's what everybody does
Going to
every
work,
week.
right? Yeah, going to work and right, trying to fill my and I don't know how I have such a terrible memory that I just rely on my calendar so much, and I look at weeks like this where it's like every single hour of every day is just you
Right.
scheduled out.
Well,
There's
it sure is nice of you to spend an hour with us then. But of those topics, and I bet I missed some, but of those topics, is there something so newsworthy that a guy like me and a guy like you and a guy like Bart should pause society and say, oh, this is deep. This is meaning we should really be talking about TikTok. And we will talk a little bit about TikTok today. But what I thought is it'd be nice in this second incoming of the Trump administration is to actually talk about structure so we can kind of put different issues in that you do have relevant expertise on that. Like maybe this will be a historic year, or maybe it won't. And so I thought it'd be nice to just encourage people to engage in their citizenship in a different way rather than just react to the news and we're mad because Democrats or Republicans said they don't want to fund the funding of the fire without other conditions or yes, that's probably true. But is if from here in me in Colorado, am I going to make a difference in that battle?
Well, I
I
think they're all worthy topics. So I don't, and I think they're all newsworthy topics, and they're all topics that serious people should pay serious attention to.
okay, good.
So that's but also, take it easy on yourself a little bit. The idea is that if you're going to be an engaged citizen, it has to be somewhat manageable. It's kind of like coming up with an exercise regime or brushing your teeth or something. Like, if brushing your teeth really did require, 6 hours of focus every day, most people wouldn't do it. But as long as it becomes a sort of manageable part of your day, you can remember to brush your teeth, and maybe you can remember to engage in some civic life. I got an email about some board. I don't even remember what it was, and it was like, "Will you be on this board?" And I sort of said, "Sure." I don't even know what it was for. But it's something in the future, so maybe I'll do it. Yeah, your civic engagement needs to be like your news diet, manageable, and it needs to be something that doesn't drive you crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So one or two last questions, and we'll start to transition into Bart. Um, so what? 5 minutes a day is good. You watch some headlines, you read a paper or two. You always subscribe to reading a really good journal or a really good blog or newsletter from credible, thoughtful, researched, intelligent
Mhm.
people, and you recommend reading good quality history books that really delve down into a subject. So those are your recommendations. What is that? Like I don't know, 10 minutes a day or half hour a day or a couple hours a
Yeah.
week?
I mean, for instance, I say I didn't really I haven't kept up on the news, but every single morning I have read the Free Press and the Dispatch newsletter.
Okay,
I
so
have,
that's what, 15 minutes total?
yeah, probably, maybe 20. And
But you don't recommend that for every citizen, that to really spend
I
20
think
minutes.
so. I think, I mean, I think that a normal person can get if you don't want to do both, um, I would guess I would lean towards doing the Dispatch because they tend to cover a little more hard news. But Free Press is really fun. I mean, especially the Friday thing that they do with Nellie Bowles is like I love her Friday newsletter. But if I think almost anybody could subscribe to the Dispatch and just read what's called the Morning Dispatch, that newsletter, and they usually do a good job of hyperlinking things so that if you want to read more about any specific topic, you can. But I think a normal person uh, can take 10 minutes out of their day and scan that. I don't think that's too heavy a lift.
Okay, so if anyone listens to finds this show somewhere that you've got a recommendation to be a good citizen, you should spend 15 minutes a day on news and commentary and
Yeah, if for no other reason, it helps to build your empathy muscles.
nice.
You're thinking about other people for a few minutes a day.
Yeah, oh, cool. That's a pleasant suggestion. So I think I'm ready to transition. Yeah, I think let's move on to Bart. Bart, you're gonna just tell us that everything is gonna be. Oh, one more for you, Professor.
Yeah, okay.
I don't like this word. I don't like what is that? Anti-Trumpers, and I don't particularly like Trump derangement syndrome either. I think that's some of that kind of stuff. I think is silly putting labels on people. But there are quite a few people that are just like completely infatuated with Trump on both sides. Maybe, I don't know, 50% of the population, maybe 30% on one side and 20% on the other are just infatuated with everything. They love this. It's kind of like sport or something or entertainment. Or do you agree with that? Are there a lot of people that just
I
really
think the
need to talk
numbers
about it?
are lower.
Oh, good, good. Like how low?
Well, I don't know, but I just know that anytime we've studied like social media engagement or news engagement, that we tend to overestimate how much time people spend thinking about politics because the people who spend a lot of time thinking about politics talk about it all the time. But once you realize that it's actually a very small percentage of the population who's talking about it a lot, you know.
Yeah.
So I, I mean, I think almost every American has thoughts about, um, you know, the Trump administration. I don't know how much time people spend in active engagement with
It's really
day-to-day.
insightful, and I do think I'll take it back. I think you're probably right. Most people do what you're doing this week. They live their life. Okay,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I
All
mean,
right.
the thing that let me caveat my own,
Well, great. Now you're going to get me to
because
flip
there
flop
are a
twice.
lot of people who spend 6 to 7 hours on their phones, or on the internet, and I don't know what they do for a living, but I guess I could do that on a weekend or something. But um, I guess. But my sister always makes fun of me when she says, and she's a listener, by the way. So when we skip a week, I hear about it from my sister.
Oh,
She's
I love that.
my older
That's so
sister. She lets me know like I didn't get to hear the episode, or when we don't upload it fast
nice.
enough. I'm like, because she needs so
She needs to get a hit from her
yeah.
hysterical
Anyway,
brother.
but she's always says, well, let me see how much time you spend on your phone. And I always make the exception if I'm listening to something that doesn't count.
Yeah.
Because if you look at my phone usage, it's almost all podcast or listening to
Yeah. You're
music.
listening while
Yeah,
you're walking to class
but
and stuff. Yeah.
so
That's
I
fine.
guess I can't make this blanket statement about phone
Okay.
use.
Well, I still stick with my premise, even though you got me to flip flop twice. I
Yeah, yeah.
think my premise is that we should engage the Trump administration in a different way than everybody seems to want to engage him, the last administration. And when he was out of office for 4 years, we paid all this attention to him. And it's not that I have fatigue. Actually, I'm kind of intellectually curious on what the powers of the president can be with a compatible Congress and a compatible Supreme Court. This is going to be an interesting time with a person with a political science degree. I like this. I think it's going to be interesting. But I don't know if it's effective and actually good for people's soul to be all bent out of shape every day. So the people that do pay attention to politics and love Trump or hate Trump, I don't know if it's good to be so excited about every little thing or so scared about every little thing. I think
Yeah.
people should prioritize. Do you agree or disagree?
Uh, I agree, but I think that people should approach. I wish that news media would approach Trump this time the way they should have approached him last time, and the way I wish they would have approached the Biden administration the last time, which is that the most effective thing that they can do is just report it straight. Instead of saying he tweeted out a message, say the president issued a statement today, and then just read the statement and
Yeah,
then comment on it. Because if you want people to be outraged, you don't have to tell them to be outraged when somebody does something that is outrageous. So you can maintain your credibility if you simply report it straight. Say, here's what happened.
excellent.
And I
That's good.
think,
That's good advice.
yeah,
And let's try to do that in our conversations over the next 4 years, because I don't want to be driven nuts. I don't want to be a hypocrite. So that's actually very helpful. Not that I don't have opinions on all sorts of stuff, and I'm willing to share them, um,
I
but I'm
think
not
we've
a
done that. I actually went back to some of the older episodes, and when we're talking about Trump or Biden and now Trump again, and I think we've done a pretty good job of sticking to what was our actual, and that's the nice thing about when Jake is here. It's like, let's pause for a second and let's see what the actual statement was before we go
yeah,
off half-cocked and
yeah.
go down not maybe not dangerous pathway, but
Just-
a
yeah,
less accurate road. We're
yeah.
pretty good at putting the brakes on ourselves, I think.
I love that. I concur. We are wonderful. Okay. Um, okay. Thanks
Especially
for
Bart.
that.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Okay, Bart, I'd like to start at the very beginning, if you don't mind, and I don't want to put my political science bias into it. I'd like to actually just have your legal beagle hat on. How many years or decades did you draft laws for the state of Colorado?
For 3 decades.
Yeah, 30 years of practical experience. It's not hypothetical. It's not in the classroom. It's not a political person talking about. You are actually the guy in the state capitol drafting legislation on behalf of legislators.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay.
Yes.
So are you a subject matter expert?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Professor Tootle, do you accept him as
I
a
do. I think that 5 years of experience would make
yeah,
this.
exactly.
I think actually probably I would accept three.
Yeah,
And when you
well,
multiply that by 10, yeah, I'd say you're solid.
exactly. Okay, Bart. Last week we talked about the Article 1 in the Constitution, the most important branch. I mean, they're all important branches, but the first among equals is Congress. Congress has the power to draft laws. It's right there in the Constitution, right? And so we really should just pay attention to Congress, right? If we're trying to be a good citizen, we want to understand laws. We just need to pass what goes through the House, the Senate, and is signed into law by the U.S. president. And then, cool, we're done, right?
No.
No. Okay. Well,
I don't. I
let's
don't
start
think.
from the beginning and explain.
Okay. Well, let's. The Constitution is interesting because it never says anywhere in the Constitution that the three branches of government are equal. You've got to actually read the Federalist Papers to figure out that there was actually disagreement among the authors of the Federalist Papers on whether the branches were equal or not. I think there is a U.S. Supreme Court case from God knows when that sort of at some point said that the branches are co-equal or something. But the reality is all the branches have power to execute whatever their functions are. The reason I believe
But do you mean make law?
What's
You mean
that?
make law?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, there are people who would disagree with me on that. There are people who
Really?
would say, oh, the president can't really make law. Well, I think the president can, using, his or her power. And I think governors at the state level have that ability too.
Why,
The
Bart, I'm sorry to be like cross-examining you already, but what do you
Please
mean?
go
How is there
ahead.
any disagreement? An executive order by the president or a state governor, it has the force of law. It is law. What do you mean there's disagreement?
Oh, I think there are people who believe that that if Congress doesn't actually, well, one of the controversies we've had going on recently is over rulemaking power of executive branch agencies. And we had the Loper Bright decision, which overruled Chevron and all of that. The Chevron standard, of course, gave extreme deference to the executive branch. Basically, if they were doing something reasonably and they were exercising what the courts called their expertise, the rule would probably be upheld. The Loper Bright standard has now required courts to go back and make an independent evaluation of whether an agency has statutory authority to actually do something.
But they
Um,
are laws. I mean, it's still, if they have the authority, it's still a law. A regulation is a
um,
law.
yes, yes.
Well, let me ask you guys, because you're both, in a sense, lawyers. Do they cover on the first day of law school? Do they sit you down and say, this is what a law is? Because
No.
if you know what a law is,
Yeah, they
then
do, Bart.
then you can decide if these branches can make them. Because I mean, I think the way a layman would understand a law is that, I mean, and I want you two lawyers to correct me on this, but
And by the way, I'm not a lawyer. I have a law degree,
you have a
Professor.
law degree. Sorry, yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
But I I just think of law and how it operates upon a citizen as being a decision made that a person has to peaceably comply with.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Yes. And I agree
And
with that completely. That's exactly what a law is. And we
Now,
actually, go ahead, John.
and furthermore, in America, not necessarily all across the world, but in America, it has to be written. It can't be an oral law. They can say it verbally, but somebody's got to write it down. We've got to be able to read it in advance. You can't do it. And well, I said it yesterday and no one wrote it down. And you go, well, that's not a law. You won't get punished for that. It's got to be written down. Agree or disagree, Bart?
I agree. It has to be in some form where you can go back and figure out what it is that the citizen is supposed to do. And that can be in a court case. That's what we lawyer types call common law. When the judges will issue decisions that people in effect are required to comply with. Laws can be very formal, like a law passed by Congress that the president signs.
Okay,
Laws
Bart,
can
let me
be
interrupt you.
regulations.
Let me interrupt you
where
and see if I can go down a hierarchy. Go ahead, Professor, and then
oh, I
I'll
just
agree.
where would jury instructions fall in this framework?
Well, you're going in weird detail.
Jury instructions are like a hybrid.
Okay.
A lot of them now are written down. Most states have kind of standard jury instructions that judges are expected to
Mhm.
give, and lawyers can ask judges to kind of tailor special instructions for given cases. So they are written down,
Yeah.
but they also are common law.
So I just know that in California, because we have so many regulations and they often conflict with one another, that
Mhm.
the legal advice many people are given is don't look at what the law says. Look at what the jury instructions say, because the laws
Mhm.
conflict with one another, and judges have had to reconcile this in the past. So what actually matters is at least as far as they always say, like, if you're accused of a crime, you go on CalCrim and you look up the criminal jury instructions, because that's
Fascinating.
actually going to decide whether what you did was a crime, and whether what a jury will be told that
Fascinating.
they're going to have to.
Mhm.
Well, Bart, with zero legal practice, me, and 30 years or 40 years now for you plus, I'm going to go out on the line and say jury instructions are actually have the force of law, and if you violate
Mhm.
those, there can be penalties, and you can be put in jail and be upheld on appeal. So therefore, it's a law. You violate the jury instruction, yeah, you can be penalized. I think it's a law.
Yeah,
Disagree
no,
or
I
disagree?
agree with you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let me start at the beginning though, with a practical case, because that might help. Sometime a year within the last year or two, Congress passed a bill that says TikTok's going to expire unless it's sold to a non-Chinese owned company on January 19th, which is this Sunday. So Congress, full of law, right? And today, I think, I didn't read it, I just saw the headline. The US Supreme Court ruled that that law is constitutional. It's not a violation of free speech. I can't remember Professor Tootle's prediction on what the Supreme Court would do, if anything. Do you remember?
Yeah, I said they'd uphold it.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
that
I
was a
did too.
yeah, I think I
Right.
did too. That's
Yeah,
wise. I mean, Congress acted, president signed. Free speech is one thing, but Congress and over national security issues can do a lot. So it's settled, right? I mean, on the 19th, this Sunday, it's done, correct?
Well, the law is going to stay in effect. The question's going to be what is actually going to happen because, TikTok, yeah, TikTok can't continue to operate, but my understanding of the way the law works is they can't continue to update the algorithm from that is controlled by the People's Republic of China. So basically, the algorithm that's working on Sunday will kind of continue to work because things on the internet live forever. So that's not going to go anywhere. The question is sort of how is that going to start to get unwound? Or will the ByteDance people decide, okay, we're going to give in, we're going to sell this for umpty hundreds of billions of dollars to someone
Yep.
who qualifies under the law?
Well,
Or the other option is will the new president, Donald Trump, try to intervene somehow because he keeps saying that he's going to. In fact,
right.
he's invited the head of TikTok to the inauguration. I read this morning on one of the things I read. It was either, I don't know if it was I don't think it was in the Dispatch. I think it was somewhere else.
So, but Bart, I'm not on TikTok, so I don't have a horse in this race.
I'm not even.
But you and I are dumb, and so is the professor. Are you on TikTok?
no, never have been.
170 million Americans. That may not be right, but it's a lot of Americans are on it, including 70 million Americans who make money. So it's probably modest for almost all of them, but it's a little bit of money because they produce some funny video and they get a little portion. So
Mhm.
it is a huge deal for the average citizen from a populist president, Trump. I can see why he's doing this. I mean, there's pressure from all sorts of people that are actually paying their mortgage or their rent or partial, buying groceries with
Mhm.
some money. This is a big deal. Can't the president just not follow the law on this?
I think it would be very
Mhm.
difficult. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I think
Was
it'd
that
be very
question for
difficult
Bart?
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it would be very difficult. I think they're going to have to follow it. And, and I have to admit, I'm not an expert on the internet. And I don't know, what I was thinking this through in my mind, John, while you were asking that question. I was thinking, okay, how are they going to stop the TikTok app from updating the algorithm? I mean, there must be someone somewhere. I don't know if the military still has an interest in the actual internet itself. Can they go in and just block it? I don't know how that works.
Or wouldn't it be an administrative penalty for the folks that update it, Apple Store and Google
Yes.
Store?
I
Yeah.
do know that that's going into effect is that um, that it's the app stores will
So,
Nah.
so,
carry
so
it.
from a business interest, they're worried about the long arm of the federal government shutting down their entire business if they're not following
Oh,
congressional
I'm sure
statute.
Apple and Google are going to comply.
Yeah.
Right.
They yeah, but here's I mean, I'm interested in the legal questions, but I'm also interested in some of these social issues surrounding it because there's so many people who are addicted to it that
Mm-hmm.
they're already migrating to other entities also owned by the Chinese government.
Yeah,
Uh,
red
they
page or whatever that's called.
yeah, I don't know the names of all these alternative platforms. But the other thing is that people want it so badly that they might simply start downloading it from China and installing it on their phones
Through
and doing it
VPN.
outside of the pardon?
Yeah,
Yes,
through a VPN, which
right.
any of
Yeah.
us could do. We could
Yeah.
all become, there could be 70 million lawbreakers in the United States.
Yes. Yeah. But it will operate a little bit like marijuana law in a way, you know,
Mm.
like
Hmm.
states that legalized marijuana, but the federal government didn't. So it meant that, banks were hesitant to handle the money of the marijuana industry. Um, it's it's almost going to be like that. Yes, the app stores refuse to sanction this, but the internet and the dark web are unfiltered, and
So
so people can get
let's
around
go
it.
back to the
Hmm.
social in a second, Professor, because I've got a prediction too. Let's keep on legal for just a
Yeah,
minute.
yeah.
Uh, Bart, is not what Congress did and what the US Supreme Court backed up, is that not like bedrock, most important law in the United States? If both houses of Congress, the president signs and the US Supreme Court upholds, isn't that just like, wow, that's a law?
Yes, but
Okay.
the higher law is actually the U.S. Constitution
Well,
and
but
the
they held
state
it they
constitution.
upheld it as constitutional. So that's a
Right,
part of my fact scenario.
exactly.
There's
And
nothing stronger than this. It is rock solid as possible, right?
yes, I would say the TikTok law, yes, is rock
Okay.
solid at this point. The Supreme Court is not going to revisit that. Although I haven't read the opinion, I haven't even read news articles very
Right, right,
much on it. I saw headlines.
right. Okay,
Um,
so now let's switch gears to politics for a second,
okay.
because this is what I think is going to happen. Because of the power of President Trump's persona, it really is his persona power, not his. He doesn't have more military weapons. He doesn't have more lawyers. He doesn't have more IRS agents. He has just his bully pulpit power. Is going to tell Congress to overturn their own damn law, write a new law allowing TikTok to do whatever they kind of figure out. That's going to happen, I think, as early as Monday, or maybe it'll take a week or something. But I think they're just going to change the law again. Is that possible? That's my prediction. Is that going to happen? Come on, okay, Professor. This is in your realm. Why not?
No, no, it's not going to happen.
Why not?
Passing a law is hard. Yeah,
What is?
passing a law is really hard, and
Ah, I do want to get into that.
so
Um,
I don't think he's got the support to pass this law, pass
Well,
the
probably
repeal of this
probably
law.
because of details, right? There probably are national security interests that once the smart people in Congress really think about,
Well,
maybe not the 70 million Americans who use it, but
I
what?
just think that there are some people in the sort of Trump adjacent circles who have also said, you know, um, they haven't had a full security briefing lately.
Right.
As in, I wonder if even if Trump himself can't have it explained to him properly, but I just have a hard time believing that some once somebody explains the other parts of this to him. And the other thing that is somewhat damning in all of this is that TikTok and ByteDance are sort of proving that it's not about money. Because if, if if this platform was out to make money, they would comply with the law. It, so the fact that they're not complying with the law indicates that maybe TikTok was never about making money. So we'll see. I mean,
Hmm.
if
I'm sticking with
ByteDance,
I'm sticking with my prediction. It
okay,
is it with Trump's power persona with the current Congress. He's even telling people to who can serve on committees. That's really unusual for a president to tell Congress who he wants on a committee.
okay. Next time I come to Colorado, we'll go back to that brew pub you took me to, and
Yeah.
you're paying if
Okay.
the only thing that I want to make sure we understand what the bet is, right?
Okay.
It's it's that Congress will pass a law
Yes.
to explicitly repeal the TikTok law,
That's
right?
going to happen.
And it will pass both houses of Congress and be signed by President Trump.
And then
I say
obviously it would be
no.
constitutional again because the
Yep,
Supreme
yep.
Court will uphold whatever Congress wants to do.
I
Yes.
say no, you say yes. What's our timeline? In the next year or 2 years?
Oh, well, I'm definitely going to take. Well, I'll take 2 years because I was going to go a week. I think it's
Oh, a
going to happen.
week? Oh my
I think
gosh!
it's going to happen on Monday. I heard two.
Oh,
However long
I'll
it
take the
takes to write the
mortgage to your
law.
house if I would bet the mortgages to our house if you thought that this law was going to be signed into
Well,
in a
let's
week.
go a year. Let's go next summer because I think
Oh,
that's when you're coming out again.
all
I'll buy you
right.
a beer next summer. So,
Okay.
Bart, now from a lawyer, you've just heard two public policy people, one a history professor and one a public policy guy with a law degree, argue about policy. From a legal perspective, though, really, Congress can do whatever they want whenever they want. I mean, it may take them a day or two, right? Or a week or two to change or just to strike. They can just say strike below. Can't they do that? And that law's gone. I mean, practically, they could actually do it like by Wednesday, right?
From a legal standpoint, yes, they could do that.
Okay.
Congress does not have, they have kind of they have a rule about, well, no, they've actually waived that rule. Actually, I
Right.
think about 200 years ago. There's a difference between like second reading of a bill, this is getting way down in the weeds, and
Right.
third reading. But in Congress, sometimes what they'll do is they'll say, well, once we're done talking about this, it's going to be deemed that it's been passed on second reading and third reading. So
Hmm.
yes, they can do. Congress can act very, very quickly if they want to.
Okay. So we'll just see. I think President Trump on this kind of issue is going to exert his power really effectively. And so let's talk about what else he is going to do on Monday. In a legal perspective, Bart, and then jumping in whenever you want, Professor. So, Bart, he's going to issue over 100 executive orders on Monday. Law or not?
Presumptive, yes, yes, there'll
Yeah.
be law.
So, citizens should be just as concerned about those 100 executive orders as they are whatever Congress passes, or no, because what's the difference between an executive order and a statute?
You know, the way our government works today, I don't think this was what the founders intended. I think people need to worry about executive orders as much as they do laws passed by Congress
Damn, that was
because
not
they can
the answer
have
I
the
was looking
same
for.
effect.
Huh.
You know,
That was not
basically,
the
as a
answer I was looking
citizen, you have to do what they say.
for.
The
Okay,
only caveat
Professor, do
I
you
would
agree
say
or
is,
disagree?
well, I agree on day one, but I disagree. I don't disagree, but I would just add this caveat that if the president issues an executive order that is contrary to existing law or the Constitution, it becomes much easier to challenge and tie up, and you have a much better chance of fighting it. But you have to also have money in order to do that and time.
Mm-hmm.
But usually in a sort of modern America, there will be some interest group that will, with deep enough pockets, or that already exists, right? I mean, like that's there are places that all Pacific Legal Foundation, they already exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if he does something that is unconstitutional or illegal via executive order, they're going to be showing up on Monday at 8 a.m. as soon as that court
Oh,
order, and they're
absolutely.
going to be asking for ways to challenge it. So
Yeah.
that's
And you'll have an
really,
injunction issued or
yeah.
something
Yeah,
that'll
so
stop
Bart,
it. Let
uh,
me throw one thing in,
oh, did
John,
Professor
before.
change your mind? Do you
What's
back
that?
off your premise? Did the professor change your mind?
No, I still stand by what I said because
I think we
the
agree on this. It's just a
yeah.
caveat. Yeah.
Oh, no, you're both wrong then. Let me quickly head in. Professor, you're right. Don't back off with the legal beagle Bart stuff.
Okay.
If Congress passes, as you said early, it is really hard to get a 50% plus one majority of the House and a filibuster proof of the Senate and then the president to sign. Congress's weight of a statute is much more important than an executive order because the executive order is one guy or gal who changes their mind. They can change their mind tomorrow and it's gone. And as soon as they lose election, the next president can issue 100 executive orders and just wipe them all out. Congress's statute is way more important than an executive order. Bart, did I convince you?
You didn't totally convince me on a practical level, but I believe you're right. Like the
Okay,
TikTok law, there
right.
was a presumption that that law was okay under the Constitution because Congress passed it. with presidential executive orders, the standard is much looser. It's basically, okay, the president said that, and yeah, the army will obey that. But a judge can sit there and go, well, wait a minute, what authority did you actually have to do this? You know,
Yeah. What are the parameters of former congressional laws that allow you to make that executive order? Exactly.
exactly.
By definition, it's weaker, right?
Yes,
Thank you.
in
Professor,
that
you agree
sense.
or disagree?
I agree with both of you, and I would just add the further detail that even within the executive branch, the President Trump doesn't do anything. You know, he orders things to be done. So what you often will get is the people who are supposed to actually implement the law are sent into a state of confusion. You've got one person saying doing the one thing, another person saying another, and then you've got a judge saying, don't do anything until I say.
Mm-hmm.
And then the president comes back and says, ignore that judge. Okay, career bureaucrat, you're like, I don't know. I'm not a political appointee. And this guy has the sheriff's department with him. So I'm going to listen to the judge with and so even within the executive branch, this stuff can
be very confusing.
Well, and you articulated it really well, Professor. The each cabinet member and sub-cabinet, probably not sub-cabinet members, they probably work for the cabinet member. They all have their own legal teams to implement regulations within their own department or division or regulatory agency.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
those,
on a smaller scale, this happens all the time. With this, again, I live in California, remember? Like, California will pass a law that is contrary to federal law. And then it's left to some
oh,
local
we haven't even
person.
gotten there yet, Professor.
Yeah,
That's different.
how do I,
Yes.
I'm just saying, imagine the branches of government giving instructions to a single person. Well, my county sheriff is supposed to follow state law and federal law regarding who gets deported, and he can't because those laws are actually contradictory. So what do the sheriffs in the state of California do? They simply prioritize the deportation of violent criminals.
Mm-hmm.
The law I'm thinking about so that they're doing the intent of both the federal and state law, even though they're not following either.
Well, let me bring one more thing up that's actually in the news a couple hours ago. Okay, that's along the same lines of what we're talking about here. Apparently, President Biden, he's still the president until Monday at noon. He held this little news conference thing where he issued a whole bunch of executive orders and I don't know, clemency and other things. But at the beginning of the meeting, he said, "It is my opinion as the president that the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution has been ratified."
Oh, whoa. That is actually really big news I have not heard of.
Yes.
But he didn't say that orally, or is he declaring the registrar to post it?
Well, that's the controversy now because the registrar has, of the archives has already said, oh, I don't think it's been ratified. Well, Biden is basically saying, well, I think it was ratified when Virginia became the 38th state to ratify it. And the other states that, I don't know, de-ratified it after that don't count, basically. Now they asked Biden, is he going to issue an executive order on this? And he said no. And the White House people, of course, are all running around going, well, yes, the president did this and he said this and blah, blah, blah. Basically, what they're doing here is setting up a classic American thing. This can only happen in the United States. There's not going to be a formal declaration that, oh my God, the Equal Rights Amendment has been ratified. But now, because the president said this, somebody somewhere in the country is going to file a lawsuit. And I bet it's going to happen by, let's just say next Wednesday. Because now what's going to happen is later today, Donald Trump is going to put on Truth Social, Joe Biden is losing it. He's declared the Equal Rights Amendment ratified. Well, that's ridiculous. But what's happening now is they've created a lawsuit, basically, because now some, female, it has to be a female because that's what the Equal Rights Amendment is about, can file a lawsuit in some federal district court where now this whole issue is going to have to get decided.
So
And my
Bart,
guess is it'll go to the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately, but it's an
so Bart,
interesting breaking story.
it is a brilliant breaking story, and now the three of us are U.S. Supreme Court judges. Professor Tootle, you're our Chief Justice. Let's see, what are you called? Justice Miller and Justice Brackney. So, under the fact scenario that you just laid out, is that a legal law? Is that a law? Will we uphold it? When that court case is filed and finally makes it up to us, and we are all 9 justices among the 3 of us, what's our vote?
So am I actually standing in the place? Because I think I know what Judge. I think I know what Roberts would. The
I know
outlines
too.
of
So
his
what are you going to
decision.
do? What are you going to do,
Or are you
Chief
asking
Justice
me? I
Tootle?
was. I feel more comfortable pretending to be John Roberts than myself. But I think
Fine. You're
Roberts
Chief
is going to
Justice
say.
Roberts. What are you going to do?
I think that they're going to hold that women are that essentially like it's legally a moot point because women have already achieved equality in the law and in their constitutional protections. And I think they will also hold that what President Biden did in no way alters the text of the United States Constitution. So I think they
That's
will. I think they will hold that women are equal, and
under where? Where is it in the law? We already determined that it has to be
in
written in the
Supreme
law.
Court decisions and in civil law. In
Common
the
law.
yeah, well, both civil, common, you name it, regulatory. They will hold that like equality has been already been preserved in the United States Constitution, and
So
therefore,
you're arguing. Hold on, one more question, and then we'll go to
yeah.
Bart or Justice Miller. We could just strike the 14th, 13th, 14th, 19th Amendment. Then that it's not important because it just culturally,
Well, you remember
civil,
I'm a 14th and 15th Amendment, 14th Amendment weirdo,
right?
because I'm the one who also says that the 14th Amendment is actually not necessary, that it was all that it shouldn't have even been necessary to spell that stuff out.
Excellent. Okay, so you're at least being consistent. I love that. And so
Yeah.
yes, we can strike that. And the
So I
19th.
would say there's no need for, there shouldn't have been a need for the 14th Amendment, and there shouldn't be a need for an Equal Rights Amendment because women and Black people and minorities and discrimination should have already been recognized as illegal under our Constitution.
Man, we're getting some really sticky, tough stuff. This is great.
And,
Professor, or not Professor, Justice Miller.
yeah,
You're Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. What's her name? How do you pronounce that name?
Ketanji
Oh,
Brown.
KBJ, isn't it?
There.
Yeah,
Or who would you like to be?
Oh, I don't know.
please, let's at least make him Kagan, right?
Yeah, I'll be
I like
Kagan.
Kagan.
All right, I'll
Okay,
be Kagan.
Justice Kagan. What do you
Yeah.
decide?
Um, you know what I decide, and this is okay. I don't know what Justice Kagan would decide, but I'll be Justice Kagan. I think the Equal Rights Amendment has been ratified. I think it's unconstitutional for Congress to put in weird time limits, limiting the amount of time the states have to ratify amendments. We had an amendment ratified in the 1980s, I think, late 1980s, that it was a minor thing, which Congress had been doing all along anyway. But they basically said that Congress couldn't raise its own salary.
Yeah.
Essentially. Now, all the state constitutions have had provisions like that since the founding, but it took like 135 years or something to ratify that, because I think it was proposed right after the Civil War, and not enough states ratified it, and they kind of went on and on and on. And finally, I think it was Michigan or some state like that was the final state to ratify it, and the archivist went, well, okay, that's part of the Constitution now. So Congress putting these artificial deadlines in there, I realized you can make arguments why it's a good idea for Congress to do that. I heard this long podcast a couple of weeks ago about repealing prohibition. Prohibition in this country was actually a constitutional amendment. So to repeal it, they needed another, constitutional amendment. Well, they knew that if they waited for the legislatures to vote, it was going to take forever. And Roosevelt, of course, wanted this thing repealed as soon as possible. So he did this nifty number where he made Congress require every state to hold a limited constitutional convention just to repeal that. And they got 2/3 or whatever the magic number of states are to hold a quick constitutional convention just on that issue to repeal it. And of course, that leads to all sorts of discussions today about, well, can you really limit a constitutional convention and blah, 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 and everybody talks about that because the big controversy is, well, if you had a constitutional convention, you couldn't limit it to a specific issue, even though we've already done that.
By the way, that's news to me, Bart. I'm surprised I didn't know that. So
I didn't know it either until I heard it.
You're saying it's already in the Constitution and Biden didn't need to do anything? What? Well, somebody's got to do something. It's got to be in the registrar. The president's got to order it, right? It can't just be. My premise is it's got to be written law and we got to be able to look at it in America. And you're just saying it's already there.
Well, this is kind of a gray area with the Constitution because the Constitution doesn't really say what happens. It just, we've got to, the Congress has passed a law saying, well, the archivist has to issue this thing saying they're going to print it with the Constitution. But
I
it's not, if you open the Constitution, you're not going to find like some moment where someone says it's happened,
Well, so I hate to be the tiebreaker in the Supreme Court decision, but that's our system. 5-4. In our case, we each represent 3 justices. So I'm going to represent 3 justices, and this will be a concurring decision, not you don't get the right to majority, Mr. Roberts. I'm going to, well, I don't know. It's going to be a tough vote. The answer is it's not an Equal Rights Amendment. The way you gave the facts this morning, if the president didn't issue an executive order to the registrar to file it, it ain't law. That's just him talking. It's like President Trump doing a truth social. It's important. It could mean something. It doesn't mean anything. And this is not going to be upheld. So they can sue, but there is no Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution because he didn't order it. He just said it. You're right on the lawsuit.
You could be right.
The lawsuit would fail. So Justice Tootle, you're correct. Well done.
I think that's it's going to be 6-3, but it's on just the question of does it go into officially go into the Constitution. But I think you're right. There's going to be some if it did go to the Supreme Court, there are going to be some wildly varying concurring opinions.
Yeah, because mine's very technical. If he were to issue whatever the process is for issuing an executive order and have his lawyers look at it and put the stamp on it and send it over to the registrar, I'd say Bart's right. It would be in the Constitution. 38 states have passed it. But if he's just talking about it, sorry, that doesn't cut it. And he knows it. And so it's a populist ploy or whatever it is.
And I have a further prediction too, by the way. So my further prediction is that even though the Supreme Court will in fact rule that women are equal, the headline the next day will be Supreme Court rules women are not equal.
ERA doesn't. Yeah. Because but to your point, from a lot of other conversations, Professor, our journey in this constitutional republic is conversation. It's or argument or debate or new law. It doesn't just end. We're not actually, we weren't designed to have perfection.
Well, that was sort of Lincoln's point that and we need to remember this about the law is that, and actually there's a student at the end of class and I was like, why would you wait until 1 minute before class to ask this question? Because it was a good question, but like everybody else wants to leave. But this is ongoing, whether it is a discussion between neighbors over a fence or between different entities within the legal system. This doesn't end. The conversation that goes on between the regulations and common law and federal law and ordinance and state law, this goes on forever. No one gets to proclaim permanent victory. I mean, you remember Lincoln's response to the Dred Scott decision, which was like, we think the Supreme Court's wrong. There are a lot of times when Americans think the Supreme Court is wrong. That doesn't make us bad citizens, but we're going to continue to oppose this Supreme Court decision that we think is wrong. And we're going to do it in all the ways that Americans can do that.
And and Professor, you don't use these words, so you can use your own words if you remember them. But this is a feature, not a bug of American
Yes.
law and process of politics. It's not. It's designed to be slow and burdensome and not give us what we want when we want it. Right? That's what we want in America.
Right. Right. And that's what keeps us from the worst atrocities in human history. Um,
Ah, which you've already talked about before. So sure, the federal government does something crazy, but the mighty Republic of California said, "Nah, we're not doing that," and then we argue about it for years. But California is not alone. There'd be another 20 states that join them, and then Texas does something on the other side, and
right.
they mash together, and we argue about it constantly. That's what we do in America, right?
Right. And California is not a prison. You don't have to stay here, right? When it becomes unbearable, people just pick up and move, you know?
Oh, you and our ally here in this podcast, Zuckerberg. You're moving
Yeah.
to Texas,
Right. Elon Musk moved to Texas, right?
and
Like,
so does Zuck, or at least his policy team.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So Bart, we skipped over a huge swath of territory, but Professor's got to get on with his day. But I mean, so there's Congress statute. There is executive order. We skipped over where almost all the laws really are, which is regulatory agency and administrative processes. And I mean, there's just that's where almost all the laws are, right? And not in a Congress doesn't do anything, or they paint this huge broad brush, thou shalt not do or thou shalt do something, and then the executive agencies, not a new executive order, just the people doing their business, bureaucrats trying to interpret Congress, put in all sorts of laws. And then the courts get involved and write common law based off both Constitution, executive order, if any, Congress, regulatory agency, and they put in common law, right? I mean, we've skipped over where most of the law really is. Why? Why do we skip this? Do citizens need to know about all that?
Absolutely.
Well, but why did we skip it then? Why didn't you say, John, let's talk where the meat and potatoes are?
I think it's because it
Say,
is
John,
very
I'm not your mom. You know, I don't get to tell you what to do, John. You ask me questions, I answer.
Work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, you're onto something, Bart. What? Why?
why, because I think it is so complicated that it's really hard to sit and have a conversation with a normal person about it. You know, like if I wanted to remodel my garage, okay, this is bringing this down to like the meat and potatoes level of people. I would have to go to my local city and I would say, hey, do I need a permit to do this? They would say, well, yes, you're going to be changing a structure.
And the
And then I
answer, by
would
the way, if
say,
you go to
okay.
the city government, the all answer is always yes. You need a don't go to the city government.
Yes.
Well, sometimes it is no, you know. I mean, and sometimes you know, even the local government people get, even the administrative people get confused. Sometimes they give you a no answer, and then 5 years later they go, "Gosh, we should have made you get a permit."
Yep.
You know, it's kind of crazy. You know, but you have to go through all these different levels, which could include approvals by elected officials. You know, I don't know, town councils or planning commissions.
And you haven't even
And
mentioned HOAs. Thank
well,
God.
yeah, the heck with HOAs. Yeah, because you might have to get their approval too.
Force of law.
Yeah, force of law. Um, you know, so I think that's the reason it's hard to have that kind of a conversation
Okay, so
because
you're right. Good job. So most people do it through the experts in their field, the general contractor or the plumber or the electrician knows, or the sign code maker. You know, the person that makes the sign actually knows some familiarity. What size letter, or is it a residential or commercial? You know, they know the law because actually they hire someone, they do a sign for someone, and then the government tells them to take down the sign. They go back to the sign shop and say, I want my money back. The sign shop now knows the law because he's forced to. So that's one reason. There are experts in the field that do this. And the second is trade associations and chambers of commerce, and they get into the minutia of regulatory authority on behalf of their client, the Oil and Gas Association, the Export Mining Drilling Association. There's people that really get in this on behalf of their clients that need to know. That's why the average citizen doesn't talk about the meat and potatoes of regulatory law, correct?
Exactly.
Cool. Let's
Exactly. And
talk
it's
about
even
one more
more of a
before.
fundamental kind of sociological issue that we've talked about on prior shows we've done, where the human mind is not designed to assimilate all of the information that is swirling around us every day. And I think it's a major challenge in our society as to what we do about that. Computers and our phones have helped, but the reality is you can't know everything. It's impossible.
And we don't want to know everything. I think we don't
Yeah.
know everything. Yeah. So I do have one more scenario that will tie some of this together. Not in a branch because the professor doesn't like tree analogies generally. Well, yeah,
Sometimes
I do.
I
Let me
like
talk.
when they're appropriate. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
right,
not for
right.
evolution.
Not as far as race. Go. Okay, so but let's put in the spine of government: federal, state, local, special district. We've already talked about the branches of government: legislative, judicial, executive, and the agencies underneath and lower courts. So it's a complex system we have. But when this is something that average citizens do care about. And so let me give you a specific example, like the social media thing. What is it? TikTok. Abortion is likely, and we'll see if Professor agrees with this or not, but is likely going to be an issue throughout the next 4 years. And it's not necessarily going to be an executive order. It's probably going to be a regulatory minutia of complex things. I don't know about those drugs, abortion drugs, but there will probably be pressure within the administration to ban this drug or ban this time thing, and I don't know what they are, but that will be a federal regulatory agency approval or denial of drugs or access. I'm not sure what they're going to be. This is not my area of expertise, and it will go headlong into state constitutional amendments and state regulations. In other cases, some citizen approved, some legislative approved. Can you give some insight on president, executive order, Congress, regulatory agency, and you can use abortion as an example if you wish, or you can skip it and use some other one. Marijuana would be a similar kind of argument. Can you give some insights on how citizens should engage when they see topics of the day? Should they get mad at everything Congress does? Or should they be more involved in their city government? Or no, they need to elect governors to fight the president? Or you know what, can you just give some legal opinion on where our weight is most valuable? Give us some flesh out this. I try to do it in layman's terms, put some legal stuff behind this.
Did you want Stephen to answer this or me?
Yeah, I want some legal
Okay.
analysis, and
All
then
right.
Steve
Legal
finish.
analysis. I think what you have to do is not focus so much on the emotional impact of what individual decisions are, as hard as that is. What you have to do is
You're a
understand.
Dr. Spock. Is that taught in legal law school? What do you mean? You take your emotions and put on your logic?
They do teach that in a way. At least they did at my law school.
No, they do.
Yeah, I mean, what you have to recognize is that, I mean, I think you're right. I think your abortion example is a really good one. I think there will be a lot of pressure because of the people who Trump is going to bring into his administration. There will be pressure kind of from the bottom up, because I think Trump is going to pretty much be quashing all of those kinds of issues.
I
He
think
won't be
that's
able to
probably
quash all of them,
yeah.
but I think you're right. I think they will try to, the states will put pressure on them to change the rules on abortion drugs, because I guess most abortions these days are done by, heavily with drugs. It's more that than surgery. The surgery is there, but I didn't exactly know what they're doing, but I think you're going to see it in that area. The question's going to, I think there's also with the abortion issue, I think there's also a possibility that Congress will try to kind of go around Trump and try to pass a national abortion ban and get him to sign it or get him to allow it to become law.
I think that's possible. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think it's possible. You might be right. What do you think,
Yeah.
Professor?
Well, if your question is about what is an individual citizen,
Yeah.
supposed to do,
Yeah. How are we
I think
supposed to
the
think?
first thing is that for anything that you feel strongly about, maybe I could tell. There's I have a off-topic anecdote that might illustrate this point. I dated this girl very briefly. I don't remember her name. It's like, but she said one
Just
thing.
on the record.
Yeah, I know. Maybe
And now she's going to look back at this and go, "You're a jerk." Don't remember her
yeah,
name.
but I do remember one thing that happened in this brief interlude where we went out a couple times. This was, I want to say after college sometime. I don't remember. I
Okay,
was
at least
probably
it's a
my
long time ago.
early to mid 20s, right?
Okay.
And she asked, would you date yourself? Would you go out with you?
Oh.
And I remember thinking, no. And there was actually a study that Brian Kaplan just shared last week that the majority of women find, the average woman finds the average man disgusting, which I thought
I
was
saw that report. No, but it's
yeah,
not average.
yeah,
It's like 90% or something.
yeah. It's anyway.
By the way, the reverse is true too. Like 90% of men think women are attractive,
Well,
and
at
90.
least for men, it's a nice, gentle,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
curve, right?
Yeah.
Which means it's probably more in keeping with what reality is, right? Most people are average looking. That's what average means, right? So,
Getting
but
yourself in trouble twice on this one. Go
I
ahead.
know. Well, Kaplan is a funny guy to follow. Anyway, what this has to do with political change is this. The thing that I think is missing in political discourse is you need to stop making arguments that appeal to you,
Ah,
because
love
political change comes when someone who believed one thing now believes something else.
it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to get somebody, it shouldn't be about like, what is it that makes me feel good about this political issue?
Mm-hmm.
It's how do I get someone who doesn't agree with me to take the next step towards agreeing with me? And in
Love
order
it.
to do that, what you, stop thinking about what you feel and start thinking about what they feel. Stop thinking about what you're afraid of and start answering, what is this person afraid of? You
Yeah,
know,
you actually got to talk to him.
and stop thinking about what you love and think about what they love. And
Yeah.
and if you do that, then you're well on the way to achieving actual political change. And it'll be actual political change that sticks because you're also changing the culture at the same time, which means this isn't going to be something that merely, is an unenforceable thing that, an unenforceable win that you get for 15 minutes. It'll actually sustain because you've managed to change the culture at the same time.
What a great conclusion to this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's great.
That really is brilliant. And I don't know why we're missing that point. I try working really hard on those types of issues, as you may know, but you're right. Oh my gosh, you're right. And we all could use improvement on that. Don't
Mm-hmm.
date yourself. Okay.
Yeah, think about why you wouldn't date yourself, and then
Yeah.
think about, like, why don't you change that? And it was actually this very key insight. I was like, oh, if I want to be attractive to women, I need to stop thinking about what I want, and I need
Right.
to think about what she wants.
Right.
Right? Like that's what like I need to be attractive to her.
Them. Yeah. That is
Not yeah. Anyway.
That is completely delightful. Bart, I don't even know how a lawyer gets into psychosocial stuff that professor doesn't usually like. But I don't know how you trump that. How do you want to conclude this show? What did I miss? Is there something that you want citizens to think about from all your experience? Hey, folks, let's do a better, like professor. I don't want to stomp you, but do you have anything that's legal wisdom for?
Yeah,
Shoot.
yeah, I do. I think what people need to understand is that the most important thing in our society, and I don't know, I always think of Alex de Tocqueville when I think about this concept, because I think he hit the nail on the head like 200 years ago or something. You have to, the way you get things done, and I think this dovetails into what Stephen was saying, is you change how people think about things based on coalitions that you build. Okay, you can, I mean, I have worked in my lifetime with people who are diametrically opposite of me politically on various issues.
You've written the laws for them.
I have done that, yes, and I've watched those people kind of buzz around me, and very good lobbyists. I know everybody hates lobbyists. Lobbyists are very important because they understand this. Yeah, I was talking to a lobbyist yesterday. Well, and John, you and I were. I don't want to dive down this rabbit hole right now, but I'm working on something, Stephen, at the state capitol. That's actually a very simple issue. What in Colorado, if you log on to the legislature's website, you cannot watch and listen to a legislative committee meeting. You can watch and listen to them on the House and Senate floor, but they have never agreed to put their committee meetings. They've never, agreed to video their committee meetings.
And you have like 3 minutes, Bart.
What's that?
Like 3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. Here's the deal. In order to get this done, I have to convince the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate to do this. Well, a lobbyist got in touch with me yesterday, who's actually a really good lobbyist, and he said, hey, I'm willing to help you do this. And I think we can do it by assembling a coalition of people who hate each other, because they will agree that it's about time the legislature in Colorado videoed their committee meetings. I mean, we're talking about the good government open meetings law people, as well as the disabled community, as well as the massive conservatives.
Yeah.
Because they hate the fact that the Democrats control the legislature, but they're keeping it all secret. They're really not, but you know what I mean? It's not as accessible as it could be with modern technology. So if you want to accomplish something, you have to be willing to do that. You've got to be willing to put yourself out there and have somebody say, I've disagreed with you on just about everything you've ever said, but that last thing you said is really right. I think we should do something about that. And with that little kernel of connection, you're able to start making change that you want to have happen.
I love that.
That's exactly what Stephen was saying, I think, a minute ago.
But that's a good legal example that he truly is involved in that. He was in one of the major papers, Professor. He's the chairman of this committee that's almost defunct or whatever, and he has been for years, and no one's willing to listen to him. And 48 states have done it, but no, we can't. We have to be one of 2 states in the country that doesn't show. I mean, that's crazy. Bart, finish this for us, will you?
I'm trying, John. I'm trying.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Professor, I know you need to go. So let's finish off the show. Thank you for the conversation today. Next week, we're going to do a first blush of the new Trump administration. We're going to try to follow our own advice from this week. And so we're going to take all the crazy stuff or rational stuff that happens next week and give it a first glance. We're going to make the first note of history next Friday.
I have one plug, since Bart just brought it up, as a de Tocqueville fan, that I just had a piece come out on de Tocqueville on Constitution.
Yep. Did Stephen freeze?
I still got you. Just hang on, Professor, if you can hear us.
I can hear you.
Oh, start again. You have one note on de Tocqueville.
Yeah. So I would just say, go on Constituting America. They have a study on de Tocqueville right now. I wrote a piece a couple weeks ago. My friend Tony Williams just had a piece come out a couple days ago, and they got a lot of scholars from all over the country to break down de Tocqueville from beginning to end. And so if you're a de Tocqueville fan, or if you're a Tootle Talk fan, you can look up my essay on.
And is your essay all academic, or can we as laymen understand it?
That's kind of the whole point, is that it's that you get experts to explain complicated things. That's what Constituting America does. Very useful for a lot of teachers. Teachers use it a lot.
Excellent. That's a good push. I'll see if I can help push that out.
And if you're a Northern Exposure fan, do you remember that TV show?
Yeah.
The person at Constituting America is Maggie from Northern Exposure. This is her entity. So
Oh,
you
how
can
cool.
Ah,
hear, so you can hear Maggie from Northern Exposure, Janine Turner, reading my essay
no
because
kidding.
she's the
I'm gonna
major
do that.
force behind Constituting America. I think she might have founded it.
Yeah, I
I
think she
don't.
did.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're just like 1 degree of separation away from greatness on that. Northern
Yeah.
Exposure
How
is
about
awesome.
that? Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm gonna do
Okay.
that. It's Constituting America, huh?
Yep. Yep. And
Okay,
it's, I
got
think
it.
it's called like a 90-day study on de Tocqueville. And they
Okay.
literally, we're each given a part of it. Every scholar is given a part of it, and we describe every single part of democracy in America.
All
Wow.
right. I'm
Okay.
really glad you finished with that. That's a good a civic homework assignment for us. Professor, I know you got to go, so I'm hanging up on us.
All
Thank you
right.
All
for your
right.
Take
time,
care.
Bart. Good job today. Have a
Yeah.
great day, gentlemen.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
See you next Friday.
Bye-bye.